All right, it's recording.
Excellent. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Leveraging Public Funds for Business. Today, we're going to be joined by Brent Donnelly, who's the State Director for the Small Business Administration, as well as Sandra Doncella, who is the Deputy Managing Director for the Western Region for Exim Bank. Now, this session is going to be a little bit different than some of the sessions we've run in the past on SBA programs. And that's because in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic that's happening, the SBA has taken on a particularly vital role in getting relief out to businesses across the nation. And so I've asked Brent, and he has graciously agreed to join us, despite the fact that I think he's doing something like 27 Zoom conferences a day, roughly, I'm guessing. So Brent's going to join us and talk principally about the SBA's response to COVID-19 today. Now, this means that he's not going to drill down on some of the other SBA programs that are posted in the Moodle shell that are very valuable to small businesses across our state. So if you do have questions about those in relationship to growing your business, please feel free to let me know, and we'll see if we can get those answered. But in light of current circumstances, we really thought it was important to allow Brent to have an opportunity to message to you all about SBA's response to COVID-19. So we're going to start there. We've got an hour and a half for this class, so we're going to break it up. We've got about 45 minutes. Brent's going to talk for 20, 30 minutes, and then we're going to do some questions for him, and then we're going to kick it over to Sandra. Okay? All right, and so also apologies, both of our presenters today are joining vis-a-vis telephone only, so just for every student in the class, I think you should know that these are just amazing people through and through, and if you could see their faces, we would, we'll post little pictures of their faces later so that you can at least see who is sharing information with you today. Thanks, you guys, and Brent, we're gonna kick it over to you first. What can you tell us?
All right. Outstanding. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and the invitation to speak with the class today. And seriously, we're probably doing you a favor. At least I shouldn't say, Sandra. I'm doing you a favor by being on the phone and not in person this morning. So,
that's true.
Yeah, it's things have been very active with the U.S. Small Business Administration, especially over the past very recent few weeks. And so great opportunities to talk to you all about that. I'm certain you've all seen in the headlines, the news headlines all over the place, information about how businesses have been impacted in various ways through the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, including orders in many areas of the country, including Montana, where businesses are required to close or significantly scale back. And so just before I start talking about the SBA's response to that, which is what I'd like to share with you, to give maybe a picture of the impact of small business in Montana, at least pre-COVID-19 coronavirus, the SBA's Office of Advocacy has some data available about small businesses in Montana. And there are over 20,000 businesses in Montana that are considered, quote, small in accordance with the Small Business Administration definition. And those businesses represented employing over 65% of the employees in Montana. And so this is a very significant impact to our communities. That level of small business, and in Montana, small businesses are really the cornerstones of our rural communities. And they play such an important role, not only in providing products and services to those rural communities, but also innovation, employment, and they support all of the things that we kind of do here in Montana. And so this impact has been huge. We've literally, at the district office of the SBA here in Montana, we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of calls, emails, text messages. Businesses have contacted us in all different ways over the last few weeks as they've been impacted by this. So this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic began to play out. one of the initial responses that the SBA was involved with for small business is through a program called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And that actually was an existing program that the SBA had available through what's called the Office of Disaster Assistance. And so that's a section of the Small Business Administration which historically has come into a region or even a local community that's impacted by a natural disaster. And so these would be, you might think of these things like tornadoes or hurricanes or floods that impact the region. And the SBA then would come in with some low interest rate, long-term financing options to help with the recovery. And so that's been the application historically for that program. Congress took action on that and basically opened the door for that particular program to be used for the virus pandemic, which is a new use for that. So that was fine, except for this is a national application, so we're not just impacting a region. We're not just coming into a smaller area of the country. What happened with that, that door was opened. And interestingly enough, perhaps for the class, as far as process-wise, in order for that program to become available to businesses in Montana and other states, the governor's office had to submit a disaster declaration request up to the SBA administrator to make a disaster declaration request. And that's done on a county-by-county basis. And so data has to be collected from counties through what's called an economic injury worksheet to document that there's been businesses adversely impacted by the current situation. Montana, in order to get that, there was a partnership with the governor's office, the Department of Commerce, pretty much all of the local economic development organizations, the SBA, chambers of commerce, the state's disaster office came together on a Friday, and we had the initial request up to the SBA administrator on Monday. So Montana was one of the first handful of states to have this disaster declaration in the United States. What this did is opened up this loan program for small businesses, and what they could do is apply for a loan through this program of up to $2 million. Businesses' interest rate is only 3.75%. The loan term is as long as 30 years, and payments can be deferred on this loan for up to 12 months. So businesses began applying for this program through the SBA website. The SBA website, I mentioned earlier, this is a national application, didn't quite have the technological background to handle that volume of applications. And so it became slow and it crashed a few times and different things like that. So the SBA actually fairly quickly, it was pretty remarkable, was able to come in behind the scenes, shore up the technological backbone of the system and get it back up and running in such a way that businesses now are much more easily able to access that site and submit applications. While that's all happening, and you may have noticed last Friday, so a week ago today, Congress passed the CARES Act. Within the CARES Act, that was a $2.2 trillion bill. The SBA was mentioned in there for, I think, around $367 billion of that assistance to be funneled through some of these programs, and created a new program for small business. On that economic injury disaster loan, there was some eligibility opened up there, as well as the potential for businesses to request an advance of up to $10,000 once they had a complete application, to get money in their business's hands a little bit more quickly, because it was taking a while to process these hundreds of thousands of disaster applications that were submitted. So that's on the ground now, and that is kind of the first and second responses by the SBA to provide some assistance to small businesses. What's going on now, literally today, as we're speaking and talking about this, is the rollout of the other component of the CARES Act which the SBA is responding to small business. It's called the Paycheck Protection Plan. And so this was tagged as far as dollar amount in the bill is $349 billion. And the way these funds are being administered to small businesses is through our network of approved SBA lenders and other lenders that can now be approved through the program. And so what the program is intended to do is provide businesses with capital to help them cover payroll costs predominantly, as well as mortgage interest payments, rent payments, and utility payments for up to an 8-week period. And the idea there is for small businesses across the United States and in Montana to be able to retain some of their employees for at least for a period of time. And that period of time is for up to 8 weeks. So how this program is going to work is businesses can provide their payroll information over the last year and calculate an average monthly payroll amount. They can set a loan amount then equal to 2.5 times their average monthly payroll and have that provided to them by their bank in the form of a loan. Provided that business expends those funds, at least 75% of those funds for payroll and no more than 25% of those funds for mortgage interest, utilities, and rent, then at the end of the 8-week period, the loan becomes forgivable to the business. And so essentially that loan would turn into a grant for the business. So in this way, the SBA is providing that capital to help these businesses maintain their employment, at least for that 8-week period. So when I say that this is happening right now, to your interest, as you perhaps saw on the news last night and this morning and maybe this evening and over the weekend, the rollout of that particular program began really last night. It occurred overnight. Literally in Montana, we had our banks and lenders submitting applications through the system when it opened up in the middle of the night and all throughout the night and throughout this morning. To give you an idea of the interest in this program, there's a training or an overview for our lenders and partners here in Montana occurring concurrent with this particular call. And when I had to drop off to jump over here, there was 728 bankers and resource partners on that call. Honestly, didn't know we even had that many in this state. So literally everyone has interest in this program. So it'll be, I think from an academic standpoint, for you all to have the opportunity to be here right now watching what has happened up to this point with the coronavirus pandemic, having a little bit of an understanding of, the response from the federal government through the SBA programs, seeing that roll out now going forward, seeing how that plays out in the future, should be a very interesting opportunity for you. I think with that, I'm going to wrap up my my presentation, and I would be glad to take questions, Brigitta, from you or anyone else on the call.
Sure. I guess I'll see if we've got students that have questions specific to the SBA's response to COVID first, and then I do have a number of questions and clarifications for you.
Great, thanks.
I can't see folks raising hands, so David, Jared.
Can I go real quick?
Sure. Who are you?
David Beach. Sorry, I'm calling in too. So
that's okay, David.
I'm really wondering about the rollout timeline for the Paycheck Protection Program. What's the deadline for this? I know they started today, but when are we gonna start seeing acceptance back on those programs?
Yeah, on the Paycheck program, so the applications are all flowing through the banks and the lenders. And what's going on with that is technically this is the first day small businesses are able to apply. Some have started to do that with the banks, and some of the banks have actually started to enter loans into our system. This morning in Montana, there was already 75 in there first thing this morning. Nationally, as of a couple hours ago, we got an update. Give me a second. I'll click on it. I'll tell you what the update was. 4,000 loans submitted for $1.4 billion by over 400 lenders. So it's starting. Now, I will also say though, with that, the rollout of the guidance to the banks, and that's a really important component of this because the banks are really the ones that are processing the applications. And so they were waiting on some guidance from the SBA, and that started to come out last night, overnight, and some this morning, and it's going to be continuing. There's already been a number of questions that have come up that we're going to need to research, probably run up the flagpole and get some guidance on. So that rollout is going to continue, but we're certainly in the ramp-up period where folks are getting educated, getting access to the systems that they need in order to facilitate these loans. So, it started now. My sense is from talking to a lot of banks, they've already got a backlog of customers that they know have approached them that have said, hey, when this is available, we are interested and we want to navigate the process with you. So there's a pretty big backlog on the banks. The banks, though, this is really interesting too. The banks have come together on this. I was on a call with probably about 20 bank presidents and credit officers earlier this week from different banks you would think were competing banks. They were all together sharing ways in which they were going to work to handle this. Some were reallocating staff for a little while to help handle the processing of these applications. So that may be a long answer to your question. I could have probably said just today, but it is started today, and I think it'll ramp up over the next few days or week significantly.
Okay. How long does it usually take to hear back about acceptance for the loans? Will that be like a couple weeks, or is that sort of?
The idea is it should be much quicker than that. There's very little underwriting on these loans. Okay. Now that's under the Paycheck Protection Program. The first response mechanism I talked about, the economic injury disaster loan, which is still available. The processing of those applications appears to be taking a while. We were originally told it was going to be a minimum of a 3-week timeline on those. I haven't gotten a recent update on the timeline, but I know that there's businesses that applied that are still waiting to hear back.
Okay, perfect. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Hey, David, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am curious. Is it something that your business has looked into already? Have you applied?
Yeah, we've definitely looked into it. Our first line is negotiating with the school district. We already got a certain amount percentage put into our contract, but we like to do more so we can pay our part-time school bus drivers. So that's what we're working on right now, and this is just something we can have on the side just in case. So, being prepared.
Yep. Okay, other questions from students who are joining us on the line here? If not, I have a number. Okay, so bear with me because I'm learning about this stuff in real time as well, but just a couple of questions that were rolling through my mind as you made your comments, Brent. You talked about the
We're all learning in real time. We're flying the airplane and we're building the wings as we go. So
I was talking with Sandra before we started. I said, one thing that this pandemic has understood is really the need to roll with it and just kind of figure it out. So.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you talked about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which is different than the Paycheck Protection Program. So I wanted to start on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program first. And I believe I heard you mention there that in that loan program, it's open to small businesses up to $2 million for the loan, 3.75% interest for 30 years. That's you apply directly through the SBA portal for that one. First, do I have all that right?
Yes.
Okay. So as a follow-up question to that, and I think of this because, we're based in Missoula, which I think has something like the highest per capita concentration of nonprofits in the United States. Can nonprofits apply for the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Program? I don't know.
Yeah, so the way the eligibility reads in that one, that particular loan, is it talks about private nonprofits. So it doesn't necessarily pull in all nonprofits. Under the Paycheck Protection Program, the way that bill text read is it simply said 501c3 nonprofits. So it's open up, as well as I don't have the designation, there's a 501c, maybe 19, a designation for veterans organizations as well in that.
Okay. All right. So if a business has made application through the SBA website for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, I think I also heard you say that as part of the CARES Act that Congress just passed, there was a provision for small businesses or applicants for that program to receive up to $10,000 of an advance. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Up to a $10,000 advance, they can elect to receive that advance, which is also forgivable.
Okay. So it's an advance on the loan, and I guess I'm just thinking. Well, there's two questions here. You get a 10K advance on the loan, and that comes directly through SBA, of course, because there's no bank intermediary on this one that I understand, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. That's a direct government loan.
Okay.
Program, the EIDL loan.
So what are you seeing on the advances that are coming? I mean, I'm sure everybody that applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program probably then said, well, heck yes, I would like to receive an advance. So is the advance automatic? Do they have to go back and request it? And then how soon after, how soon after they've made the request or initiated their loan application would that advance theoretically be coming through?
That's playing out before our eyes right now. That a request to advance component didn't go live until Monday afternoon. And so all of the applicants that applied for that loan prior to that didn't have that option to request an advance. They received a notice from the SBA that said, okay, we already received your application. A lot of them we hadn't processed yet. But if you want to request an advance, you can go back through the process and request an advance. So we're right at the end of that component. There's what was stated is that what advance would come within 3 days of having a complete application. So we are, quite honestly, I am sitting here waiting to start hearing from some businesses, hopefully that are starting to receive that maybe as soon as today or first part of next week. But that's happening right now.
So as quickly as 3 days upon receipt of a completed application, so that they're not even requiring processing first for the advance? Am I hearing that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Well, that would be huge. And practically speaking, then for the small businesses that are out there, does that funding go, is it like a direct deposit? Do they get a check? What happens?
A direct deposit.
Okay, great. And so I also heard you say that businesses that had applied for that economic injury disaster loan program prior to Monday afternoon, when things went live with the option to request that 10K advance, if they had applied beforehand directly, they have to go back through the process. Is it something as simple as like pulling up your pending application and then checking the box that says, yes, I would like the advance, or is it like you got to enter everything all over again?
It's in the middle of that. With the modifications to the website, shoring it up, they stood up a different application portal, which is much more user friendly and requires far less documentation. There's like five screens, but yeah, they would need to go back through and do that. We were also told that businesses that applied previously and they go back through that process to request the advance would not lose their place in the queue as far as in line for processing.
Yeah, important question for sure.
Yeah, a lot of folks were concerned about that. So that's what we were told on Monday afternoon. The mechanics of exactly how they're doing that behind the scenes at the disaster office, I don't know, but that's what the presumption was there.
Okay. Well, we hope certainly that we start seeing some of those businesses actually getting that 10K advance payout. And then you mentioned that can become a forgivable, essentially a grant. So what must happen for that to occur?
Well, the way I understand it currently, and some of the stuff is moving so fast, but it needs to be spent on eligible purposes, and then it can becomes a grant. And then we were also, well, I'm not going to say that because I don't have documentation, but I'll leave it at that. So,
well, suffice to say, I hope businesses are not planning a raging kegger for a lot of reasons with that money. So,
well, there's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of need, and I think what happened on that is there's so much demand for those applications, and there's just not processing capacity on the other end for that volume of applications. And so this was the way to try to address that for some of those businesses that have an immediate need. I mean, what we are hearing, I've talked to a lot of businesses. So some businesses are calling, this thing happened really fast, and some businesses just straight up got their legs chopped out right out from underneath them, and they were hurting sort of immediately. And so we've heard from a lot of those businesses. I've also heard, though, from a lot of businesses that say, okay, we're watching this scenario play out. We're still in business. We're still okay. We're still okay for a few months, but we don't know how long this is going to last. And so we're starting to think about what types of assistance opportunities are available if we need them over the summer or into the fall. Other scenarios are like seasonal businesses. There's some seasonal businesses that are looking at this going, well, my season for the year, may be shot essentially. And so they're thinking about, well, how am I going to get till next year? Right. So there's those scenarios as well. And so I think that at least through what's available right now through these SBA programs, that the Paycheck Protection Program, that should help some businesses with like 8 weeks of payroll pretty much right now, kind of in the immediate timeline. That economic injury disaster loan, that can provide businesses for working capital for a little bit longer term. So some of these businesses that are basically not going to be able to pay their bills because of the impacts of the coronavirus over some longer period of time that need that working capital, they could access that longer term money to help them get through to the other side.
Right.
That's the idea. The idea.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot because obviously there's not completely specific guidance yet, but when you're talking about eligible purposes for use of like the advance, I mean, I would assume you're talking about things like paying wages for employees, maybe paying rent, if you need for inputs, but are those things, do those sound right or out of bounds? What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's payroll, payroll-related expenses, payables, short-term debts. That was one thing that interesting in Montana, at least. There's a lot of local economic development organizations. Many of those organizations provide revolving loan funds for commercial capital in their local counties or local areas. A number of them were able to respond a little bit more quickly, so they made some of these businesses short-term loans to cover things like payroll.
Okay.
And so those loans become eligible to be folded into the economic injury disaster loan. And so that was kind of how we ended up partnering with a lot of local organizations to provide some needed capital to some of the businesses out there.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And I would imagine maybe if businesses had, existing relationships with their lenders, and maybe they did some kind of short-term debt with their lender, potentially they could use.
That's happened as well. Yep. I've heard many reports of banks working with some of their borrowers on payment deferral type arrangements of all varying different areas. Yep.
Okay.
It's kind of my sense is it's kind of a deal where, everything's kind of on the table right now, and folks are all trying to work together to navigate through to the other side. On the financial side for businesses, a big chunk of that is on the banks to work with the businesses, and my sense is they're doing a lot of that. Also with these other sources of commercial capital around the state, which are actually pretty significant, the same kind of thing is happening. So, yeah.
Couple other questions here, and thank you so much. It's just incredibly helpful to have you go through all these kind of finer points. I'm amassing questions that I had come in from other people too. So I wanted to ask about the Paycheck Protection Program, and that's the one that you're applying. You're working with a lender to get approved for this through the SBA. And I want to make sure I heard this correctly. For this one, what you do is you calculate your average monthly payroll, I guess maybe over the last 6 months or something like that, and then 2.5 times that average monthly payroll is what the bank could provide a loan for through this SBA program. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So there's some variations to the calculations when you get into the details of particular scenarios, but basically you're calculating the average monthly payroll over the prior year. And then you take that monthly amount and you multiply it by 2.5, or a factor of 2.5. And that's what the maximum loan is set at.
Okay. And it's for an 8-week period or longer.
Yeah, so it's actually written for a 2-year term.
Okay.
At an interest rate of 1%, and then provided the funds are used at least 75% for payroll, and an employer maintains their payroll, because that's the purpose of this, then the loan becomes forgivable at the end of that period. So provided the businesses are paying attention and following the rules of the program, which are really important with these programs, always important with any of these government programs, you got to make sure you're in line with the requirements. But the presumption is many of these loans will be hopefully fully forgiven. If they're not fully forgiven, partially forgiven. And then, like I said, the term, if the loan's not forgiven, the term of the loan is 2 years and interest rate's 1%.
Okay. And again, I'm sorry, but I want to make sure I understand this. You're calculating the average monthly payroll, and then this loan, 2.5 times that, but it's for a period of 8 weeks, right? I mean, I'm not the loan term. I understand that the loan term is longer than that, but is there any expectation that perhaps this might go further, more than 8 weeks, and maybe an upcoming relief act? Just curious.
as far as like a future legislation that would provide some additional assistance or make modifications to the existing program.
I mean, like, 'cause it's 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks of coverage,
you'll have to talk to your congressional delegation on that question. I don't know.
Right. I haven't.
You know,
I don't know.
I've heard. I mean, that changes all the time. So, you know, I've heard different things on that where I've heard some people talk about another phase. I've heard others talk about let's wait a little longer and see what the impacts of this phase are. So there's varying opinions out there on that. I mean, I think that for the purpose of what we're doing now is the rollout of this has been a tremendous effort, and it's going to continue that way for the next week or so, at least, maybe longer, in getting through this tranche. And so at least from the standpoint of what we're doing on the ground with the SBA and our lending partners in Montana, that's pretty much where the laser beam focus is at this point, is working through what we have on our plate right now in front of us.
Understood. So last question for me, and then I will check and make sure nobody else has a question out there. So is your recommendation to small businesses across the state, would your recommendation be, you know, do both, pursue not only the Paycheck Protection Program, but also, you know, get your application in for Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or what do you think? Is the system overwhelmed?
That's a great. No, that's a great question. It's asked by a lot of folks, and I don't think that there's necessarily a broad stroke answer. I think that it's going to depend on each individual's business's situation. I think that the Paycheck Protection Program is fairly narrow in terms of its intent to keep employees on the books with these businesses, both so that they can get paid, and also for the businesses to have some of their really important employees hopefully there when they're able to start coming back online, right? So there's a lot to that, and I think since 75% of the funds need to be used for that, it would be natural to look to that component, at least for those purposes. Now, if a business believes or projecting out that they're going to have some needs over the next, 1, 2, 3, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, a little bit longer term, then also pursuing an application through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan would be a good idea. Yeah. So one thing about these loans, there's no loan fees, there's no application fees, and we do know that the demand is high, so it may take a little while to get loans processed through the system. So kind of getting that process started, especially if you think you might need something down the road, is probably not a bad idea. Worst case happens, you don't need it, right? And that would be pretty wonderful. If you do need it, it would be pretty nice to have it available, or know that it's in process at least.
Absolutely. Okay, at this point, anybody else that's on the line there have a question for Brent? Okay. Well, Brent, thank you. I mean, that was hot off the press information, actually, for all of you joining us today. As Brent said, and I said, we're kind of all learning this real time, but the information you just got today is it's just really important. And go out there and be good ambassadors and sharing this information within your own businesses, or if you know colleagues that may benefit from these services, please let them know. Okay, Brent, any final thoughts for us on this, or are you good?
No, I think we're good. But thank you all for your time, and thanks, Brigitta, for all the great questions. We went into some detail there. I hope that's helpful for everybody. And for you or anybody else, I mean, if other questions do arise subsequent to this call, shoot me over an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
So that was a nice offer, and under normal circumstances, I'd say go for it. Ask Brent right away. I do want to point out to everybody listening on this call, I think that you must be absolutely overwhelmed right now with obligations and getting the messaging out about this. And I also just want to let people know for clarity that there are small business development centers that exist around every state, and in particular around the state of Montana. I know that the Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, is actually co-located with Montana World Trade Center offices in the Gallagher Business Building, which are not open right now. However, Jen Stevens with the SBDC here in Missoula remains very active and engaging with clients. She's got another member of her team there. And Brent, you've got, I don't know how many people you have all over the state that do just this, more or less. A couple dozen, I think, right?
Yeah, actually, Montana's got a really robust network, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a really, really good point. There are 10 SBDC centers across Montana. I think the staffing in those is at like 16 now, I think was Chad's last count. But in addition to that, there's a women's business center located in Bozeman and a branch in Hamilton. There's a Veterans Business Outreach Center in Billings that covers the whole state. There's some SCORE chapters around the state. And Montana has a pretty significant group of local economic development organizations that provide all kinds of business services and assistance in local geographic economic development district type areas. Many of those provide business counseling and financing tools. And honestly, we partner with pretty much all of those folks at some level or another, whether it's on the counseling side or to provide some sort of financing services or government contracting services. So I don't know where the members of this class are located or where your businesses are located or your friends or family's businesses are located, but they probably have somebody close by that could provide assistance and answer questions and help navigate whatever comes with the coronavirus over the next day, week, month, whatever that looks like, but also going forward, start a business. You've got a business that you want to grow or expand, or have a business, you got a bump in the road that you need to try to figure out how to navigate through. There's some pretty incredible resources in Montana. So thanks for bringing that up, Brigitta.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, thematically, that is what this class is all about, leveraging public funds for business. So just a reminder to folks out there to check out your SBDCs or your local economic development organizations as good resources. So Brent, I think we're going to go ahead and cut you loose because I know your schedule is packed. Normally I'd ask you maybe to stick around, but I appreciate the time that you've given us. So everyone, bye, Brent.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that was really helpful, actually. Every single one of those questions that I asked him, I have received multiple versions of those questions from others, so I was really glad to have some time with him there. If any of you that are part of this class session or this class in general actually are accessing these programs, I would love it if at your convenience you might be able to give me some feedback about how things are working or they're not, or what your experience is, anything from wait times to hey, this didn't work the way I thought it would, or this worked incredibly well. Any of that feedback would be fantastic. Consider it brownie points for the class, but more importantly, consider it important information that maybe we could share out through this platform.